What's up, guys? Brett Appley here from DailyFanMMA.com, back with another UFC Quick Picks on the Mayo Media Network. We have UFC Vegas 75 this weekend. Marvin Vettori versus Jared Cannonier in the main event. Had 14 fights scheduled. We are now down to 12. The Barcelos fight was canceled. Zumagulov fight canceled, moved to next week. So we are down to 12. Still going to give you my favorite cash game play, tournament play, salary play, and matchup I like from a DraftKings perspective. Before I do, as usual, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. A lot of great content coming out throughout the week, not just for MMA, but for a variety of different sports. Like the video as well, and comment below, why don't you give me your favorite pivot play? I think there's going to be some obvious chalk here on the slate, especially in the top end, and I think having at least one or two options that you can pivot to, be a little bit unique, is going to help you dramatically in large field tournaments. So always curious what you have to say. Without further ado, let's give out my cash game play of the week. It is going to be Arman Tsarukyan at 9.8K. All right, yes, I know Arman Tsarukyan is minus 1,000 to win. I know he's one of the more obvious plays on the slate. Not going to talk about him too in depth, at least from a tournament standpoint. For cash games, I still like to give out the best plays on the slate. And I have seen a lot of people, multiple people at least, mention, like, oh my God, Tsarukyan is priced at 9.8K. This is one of the biggest price tags in the history of DraftKings, at least in the last several years. Is he just too expensive? And the answer to me is still not really. 9.8K, yeah, he is expensive, a few $100s priced above Teresa Bleda, but minus 1,000 to win, minus 270 to win inside the distance, and just a very, very skillful wrestler grappler is Tsarukyan, averaging 3.3 takedowns per 15 minutes. He's put up tremendous scores in his history on DraftKings, 99, 117, 110, 126. I think he's averaging in the low 100s per win, and he's minus 1,000 to win in this matchup against Joaquim Silva, who isn't that bad. Capable striker, has some knockout power, probably not the greatest defensive grappler in the world, 65% takedown defense. It's not as if this is complete one-way traffic, but Tsarukyan may be, one of the very best fighters in this lightweight division. He's taking a clear step down here. His metrics are off the charts. So, yes, is Tsarukyan expensive? Definitely very expensive, 9.8K. If you want to look to pivot, I think Bleda, Costa are good examples in the top range that you could pivot to in tournaments. In cash games, Tsarukyan's a clear standout. I'm not really thinking twice about this. 9.8K, a lot to cost, but Tsarukyan ranks out as the safest play on the slate with a very high floor and high ceiling, and he's a near lock for me in cash games this weekend. All right, moving on to my tournament play of the week. I'm actually going to talk about Teresa Bleda at 9.5K because she's the second most expensive fighter, and it's obviously extremely difficult to play both her and Tsarukyan. I don't think many people will do it. And with Bleda coming off a UFC debut knockout loss, she scored 22 points. I just don't see many people jumping to roster Bleda at 9.5K when they can pay up for Tsarukyan at 9.8K. I think that makes her a very, very strong pivot on this slate, especially because Bleda was fighting an opponent in Natalia Silva, who is a really, really strong prospect. And now she's fighting an opponent in Gabriela Fernandez, who looks to be quite weak. Lost her UFC debut, did Fernandez, to Jasmine Jasudavicius, gave up 4 takedowns and 11 and a half minutes of control. Fernandez just isn't that good on the ground. Defended 4 of 8 takedowns and couldn't find her way back up to her feet. And Bleda, actually had some grappling success against Natalia Silva. She's young. She's still just a prospect, not like a fully formed talent, I would say. But Bleda does have some wrestling upside. That's probably the strength in her game, and I would expect her to shoot for takedowns in this particular matchup. She attempted 7 takedowns against Natalia Silva. That led to 1. I think if she attempts 7 takedowns against Gabriela Fernandez, that could lead to 3 or 4 and potentially dominant rounds and even a finish. She's only plus 200 to win inside the distance, but Bleda is, minus 244 to win overall. Like, relatively safe, at least in terms of the money line. And you have to remember, she's going from a very difficult opponent in Natalia Silva to potentially one of the weaker opponents in this division. I do think Fernandez has some striking upside, could potentially win this fight on the feet, but Bleda has a clear path to grappling success in this matchup. And yeah, of course, you're still going to consider Tsarukyan over her, and Tsarukyan's going to rate out better. But from a tournament standpoint, Bleda may be able to win this fight cleanly, dominantly, and with a lot of grappling as her means to the end. So that could score very, very well from a DraftKings perspective. 9.5K is still expensive, but I think it makes her an awesome tournament option on this slate and a very, very strong pivot off Tsarukyan in tournaments. Okay, moving on to my salary play of the week. Let's talk about Denis Bondar at 7.9K. He's actually a slight favorite now at minus 129 against Carlos Hernandez, and a fighter who still I'm unsure about, at least in terms of his long-term potential. But Bondar broke his arm in his UFC debut very early in that fight against Malcolm Gordon. I thought his grappling looked good on the regional scene. He's, a wrestler, grappler. That's his strength. And he didn't look phenomenal in the first minute against Malcolm Gordon, but ultimately 1 minute, doesn't tell me too much, and then his arm broke. So there are concerns here. However, Bondar coming back, fighting an opponent in Carlos Hernandez, who was just submitted pretty quickly by Alan Nascimento, gave up a takedown to Victor Altamirano, gave up 5 takedowns in his Dana White Contender Series fight, defending takedowns at 66%. I'm not saying Bondar's a lock here, but Bondar definitely has a path to wrestling upside, and now he's a moneyline value, a DraftKings price value, I should say, compared to that money line at 7.9K. You click on his gamer tag. He only scored 8 points in his UFC debut. I'm not sure that the public's going to flock to him, especially with the main event priced right above him. There's also plenty of options in the mid or lower 7K range to choose from as well. But I think Bondar presents a good opportunity for salary savings. Plus, he's a value on the money line. And he is potentially grappling dependent, fighting an opponent who has somewhat weak takedown defense. I still think Hernandez can win this fight. Hernandez is probably a better striker than Bondar. Maybe has a little bit of wrestling upside himself, but Hernandez I don't think is a very deep prospect. And Bondar, a guaranteed win, far from it. He's only minus 129. But for 7.9K, I think Bondar has a pretty high floor and ceiling in a victory. Obviously saves you enough salary to allow you to pay up for more finishing equity or grappling equity like we've talked about in Tsarukyan and Bleda. So I think Bondar is a pretty strong play on this slate. Definitely someone I will look to use across the board there at 7.9K. All right, finally, my matchup of the week. I'm going to go with Pat Sabatini versus Lucas Almeida. Sabatini is a clear favorite here at minus 175, Almeida plus 150 on DraftKings. Sabatini is 9.1K, Almeida 7.1K. And I kind of see this matchup as a striker versus grappler, with Sabatini being the grappler, Almeida being the striker. Sabatini is a pretty good wrestler, a pretty good no-gi grappler, and he's had a lot of success in the UFC grappling already. He is averaging 3.75 takedowns landed per 15 minutes, topped out at 6 against TJ Laramie, 5 takedowns against Tucker Lutz, and he has some back take upside, some submission upside. He submitted Jamal Embers, but he submitted Jamal Embers after getting hurt very badly, and he's now coming off a 1-minute knockout loss to Damon Jackson. Sabatini never rated out well as a striker, and he hasn't shown to be a very competent one thus far in the UFC. Questionable durability, and he's fighting a dangerous Brazilian aggressive striker in Lucas Almeida, who will put a hurting on him if Sabatini can't get this fight to the ground. I think Almeida should be the clear favorite if the fight plays out in the feet, both in terms of just pace, volume, ability to inflict damage. But Sabatini obviously may just out-grapple him, which kind of I like from a DraftKings perspective because of the binary nature. Fights minus 155 to end inside the distance. If Sabatini wins, I think it's going to come from several takedowns landed, back control, potentially a submission. And if Almeida wins, if the fight plays out on the feet, I think Almeida's pretty live to win and to earn a knockout. 7.1K is a cheap price to pay. I don't think he's going to be too popular. Inside distance line's pretty good on Almeida there at plus 225, Sabatini plus 180. So I think the winner projects to have a moderate to high ceiling in a victory. I like the binary nature of it. I do slightly lean towards Sabatini just because I prefer grapplers in general, and Lucas Almeida's not too tested on the ground. So Sabatini is a very solid play for 9.1K. I think Almeida has legitimate knockout upside, though, at 7.1K. Might offer leverage there as well. Very strong matchup to target this weekend. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this week's UFC Quick Picks. Thank you so much for the support. You can follow me on Twitter, Appley, TTPP, dailyfanmma.com for all your DraftKings breakdowns needs. Best of luck in your contest this week. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. We'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.